please let us welcome our research speaker, Dr. Christine Marie Rinaldo.
Hello. So thank you for being here this morning. I know all of you have a lot of classes later. Thank you to Dean Arinto for inviting me, and to Ma'am Nelka and also to Ma'am Irene for making this possible, and for all of you who belong to the TLRC team, thank you. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. So thank you for the long introduction. I didn't realize I gave such a long bio note, but my research is basically in cultural studies, and I teach with the Department of English and Comparative Literature in UP Diliman. Most of the courses that I teach are Anglophone literature, particularly post-imperial, post-colonial Anglophone fiction. I also teach survey courses on British literature from the 19th century to the present. So you might ask, like, why am I talking about AI when my research doesn't actually have anything or much to do with AI? My exposure to AI, or my engagements with AI, boil down to my role as somebody who as the GE coordinator of our department, and as somebody who also teaches the GE course English 13, or Writing as Thinking, as we call it in UP Diliman. So as Professor Arinto earlier mentioned, when ChatGPT became a household name in late 2022, like it threw all of us into a tailspin, and we were kind of, trying to come up on the fly policies for addressing this very disruptive technology. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. So, as Dean Arinto earlier mentioned, AI is not really something that's new. It's been around for a long while, and studies have shown that AI-generated content has, suffused much of the content that we consume on the internet. The contemporary AI landscape, specifically generative AI landscape, is like a huge industry. Generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence technology that can produce various types of content, including text, imagery, audio, and synthetic data. The recent buzz around generative AI has been driven by the simplicity of new user interfaces for creating high-quality text, graphics, and video in a matter of seconds. So that means that you don't need specialized knowledge in order to be able to use these technologies, and you don't even need a lot of money to be able to use these technologies, because as of now, a lot of free AI services on the internet and on your smartphones exist. Can I get a quick show of hands about who here uses AI in their workflows on the regular? Yeah, but I think most of us who own smartphones use generative AI on the regular, because if you're using predictive text for texting, if you use spell checkers, grammar checkers, email suggestions, etc., you're using generative AI in your workflows. So, ChatGPT. ChatGPT is probably the AI that I also use the most most often, but primarily I use it to write emails because sometimes it's Monday morning and you've been working through the weekend, and when you go to your Gmail account, you wake up to 15 emails that you need to respond to because they've been scheduled over the weekend so that you can respond to them. And sometimes you just do not have the emotional bandwidth to sound friendly on email. So sometimes this is what I do with ChatGPT. I use it to write quick email responses. Quick for ChatGPT because it can generate this in seconds, whereas I have to meditate for like 10 minutes to think about how do I muster the emotional intelligence to sound like a human being on a Monday morning. Other things I use ChatGPT for: writing letters. For example, I need to request access to a library or something. It can do that in a matter of seconds. I also use ChatGPT to create templates, for example, for student recommendations. That's another genre that we academics have to produce a lot. Now that doesn't mean that I just like copy paste what ChatGPT generates, because it's not gonna generate anything that is, attention grabbing. But I use it for the template. Like, this is the basic structure of a successful recommendation letter that will get your students places. So you can kind of use the template for that. So since ChatGPT, as I mentioned, became a household name in late November 2022, we've been able to use it for a number of things. But the thing that really pushed me to learn more about this technology is an incident that I had with a student in like November 2022. So at that time, I was handling 2 sections of English 13, Writing as Thinking, which, as many of you know, involves a lot of writing papers. That particular section was populated by a batch of education majors. So I was pretty happy with that section because, we're talking about how to improve our teaching methods. So I was very disappointed that at the end of the semester, one of the students submitted a paper that I strongly suspected of being generated by ChatGPT. Now, why did I come to be suspicious of this particular paper? Well, one, the voice of the paper doesn't sound anything like the voice of the student because, I've been reading essays by the student for the entire semester. I know how this student tends to write and tends to express herself, and the final output that she presented, one, did not sound like her, and two, had very little connection to the previous essays that she's written for class. Number two, the structure of the paper sounded incoherent. Like a lot of points were repetitive. Each paragraph can sound like it's telling you something, but when you connect one paragraph to the next one, it doesn't really have any logical flow. It doesn't really have a clear argument, but a lot of information just keeps repeating. So in the end, you read this paper and it sounds good. It's written in perfect English, but you don't come out of it feeling like you learned very much about what this student is actually thinking. Like, it's just throwing all this information at you, but at the end I was like, but what do you think about this information? So that was lacking. And then third, the paper featured a lot of fabricated sources. I'm the sort of teacher who gets very nitpicky about marking papers, so I tend to check every single source that is cited in a paper, especially if the source sounds interesting. Like, I would want to read this paper that's cited by this essay, so I would go to the source. And then when I go to the source, I get 404, like the source doesn't exist. So the paper featured a lot of these fabricated sources. So that's another red flag. And finally, the student also had an earlier case of submitting a plagiarized essay for class. It was for a very minor requirement, so it wasn't a big thing for me. I just flagged it as, this is a case of plagiarism. You have to be more careful about citing your sources, etc. So given these factors of voice, structure, fabricated sources, and the history of committing plagiarism in class, I came to the conclusion that this is most likely an AI-generated paper. So at that time, it was still very popular for teachers to use these AI text generator, detector, the detection software. So I went to one of 3 of those actually. So I went to 3 of those AI text detectors and I fed the student's essay to the generator. Like, you basically upload the essay and then the generator detector tells you whether it is AI generated or not, and then the detector, the detection software said that this essay is like 89% generated by AI. So I documented all of that, and with all of my evidence, I went to the student and said, hey, how could you do this to me? Like, why did you cheat in my class? And then the student said, I did not. Like, I authored my paper, and if you do your research, not in that tone, but she was like, if you look at, she gave me a list of sources that said that, there's actually no absolute way to detect AI-generated content. Even if you use these AI text generator detectors, even if you use these detectors, they're not 100% sure. It is basically impossible to say with absolute certainty whether AI-generated content is generated by AI or not. So that's clear, that there's no foolproof way. So you have to rely a lot on circumstantial evidence or even the admission, the self-admission of the student. But otherwise, there's no 100% fail-safe way to say that something is generated by AI. When it comes to text, I think for images, there are other, or images or videos, parang it's easier to authenticate or determine the authenticity of the thing, or even voice recordings that have been altered to make a voice recording sound like somebody's voice. So it might be different for other forms of media, but for text specifically, it's often undetectable or not. There's no absolute way to detect or verify that something is not written by AI. So when that happened, and so the student was like, I did not admit to using AI to plagiarize her, to write her paper. But in the end, I was able to fail the paper because of all of the fabricated sources. So parang even if it's not generated by AI, this is gonna fail anyway because your structure is illogical, your sources are fabricated, that's still plagiarism. So I did not have to use the AI reason to fail the paper because even as it stands, it's actually not a good paper. But that experience got me like obsessed. When I learn about something, I get obsessive about it. So I was just so obsessed about reading everything I could about AI. And my primary interest in it lay in that question of authorship. As Ma'am Arito earlier mentioned, diba, when a machine can write songs and short stories and poems for you, when a machine can compose songs, and when you listen to the song, it's actually like a bop. If a machine can compose songs and make paintings and compose all of these things that we associate with being human, then what does that mean for authorship? And what does that mean for humanity? All of these zombie movies na usually you can tell that somebody is a zombie because they lose the capacity for language. In a lot of these zombie films, when you authenticate your humanity to another human by using language. But what if you lose even this exclusive capacity for language, exclusive because machines can now process natural language? What does that mean for authorship and for humanity? So I was very interested in these questions on authorship. So that led me to speaking at this webinar, that was referred to earlier. You can access it online. Like you can take a picture of the QR code and then scan it, or you can use the bit.ly AI-writing classroom dash. It's available online on Prezi, basically here. So a recording is also available in the ECL YouTube page, so you can check it out later. I might be repeating some of the points here, but just like a quick refresher on AI or generative AI specifically. So ChatGPT, which is an example of generative AI, particularly AITGs or artificial text generation. So in this situation, I asked GPT to explain itself to me. How would you explain how AITG works for a general audience? And GPT says, I work by analyzing huge amounts of data, such as books, articles, and websites, and then learning the patterns and structures of human language. Once trained, AITG can generate new text on a given topic that resembles how humans write or speak. So another term for AITG is LLMs, or not another term, but there are a particular kind of AI called LLMs, or large language models. Large language models are they're algorithms that work with billions of parameters and terabytes worth of data that is widely available on the internet, for example. And then by analyzing huge amounts of data up to September 2021, that is the training data set of ChatGPT 3.5. We're now at ChatGPT 4, which is the paid version, so I don't use it because I don't earn enough for that. But the ChatGPT 3.5 is still for free, and it's trained on data, text data, books, internet content up to September 2021. So it basically, the algorithms work to process all of this data, and then it identifies syntactical and semantic patterns in speech and in writing. So what an LLM does, it's not really capable of rational thinking. It's not really capable of of verifying information as true or false. It's not really capable of coming up with knowledge as justified true belief. It doesn't have the capacity of reasoning. But what it is capable of is pattern recognition. So it recognizes these patterns in speech, and then it works kind of like predictive text. Now it knows that if you say what is the weather in, and then it knows that your location is located in a particular area. What is the weather in Tacloban today, mga ganon. So it kind of completes sentences based on its bank of patterns that are associated with that particular sentence fragment or something. So large language models are machine learning algorithms that can recognize, summarize, translate, predict, and generate human languages on the basis of very large text databases. So that's what ChatGPT works with. Now, because ChatGPT and other LLMs are not really capable of verification and reasoning, it's very prone to what is usually called the AI hallucination. So hallucinations are completely fabricated outputs from large language models. Even though they represent completely made up facts, the LLM output presents them with confidence and authority. So for example, you ask a question about an event that happened in 2023. Now that event is outside of the training data set of ChatGPT 3.5. ChatGPT is not gonna say, I don't know, maybe you should search about it yourself, but it's gonna give you information about that event and present it as true. That is an example of a hallucination. Now, there are obvious implications of that for disinformation and research, because increasingly, some people, they use AI without keeping in mind that this may be spouting nonsense and falsehood at me. It's very easy to just reproduce the content that AI generates and then just believe in it. Like, not everyone, of course we're in UP, we know that we have to take all of these with a grain of salt, but not everyone would do that. But there are even scarier implications. Kasi a lot of the content that we consume now on the internet, for example, advertising, marketing, clickbait articles and all of that, much of the content on the internet now is also created by text generators. So you have text generators drawing on content produced by other text generators, and then at the end you're like, okay, what is reality anymore? Everything is just referencing something else. And it's not like this is science fiction, it's happening right now. So increasingly, it becomes difficult to verify and authenticate the veracity of the information you consume, and even we consume. And even now, there's a lot of uncertainty about that, because you can have one opinion and then find some evidence on the internet to justify that opinion. You can have an opposing opinion and also find something on the internet that will prove that opinion. And it could even be that both are true at the same time, because humans are complex, paradoxes exist. But with this referentiality, this endless referentiality of AITGs, the very nature of truth telling and truth verification and truth making, they all become like points of contention, which has bigger implications about democracy, disinformation, and so on. So when AI models yield information with untraceable origins, How do users sort through what information is true and what isn't when your very sources of information can also become compromised? This is not something that individuals can address on just an individual level, no matter how smart you are, because, our knowledge systems or belief systems, our sense of what is the common sense, is something that's socially constructed. It's not just like an individual thing. So this is also a question that has been interesting to me. Now, when I teach English 13, writing as thinking, and thinking about this question of authenticating our sources of information. When I teach English 13 writing as thinking, I emphasize how citation is an ethical exercise in accountability. That is, in providing an account for how we know what we think we know. Because increasingly, in a world where the information and the knowledge you present is only as good as your sources of information, if the analysis you present is only as good as your sources of information, then you better have really good sources. You better have, you better ensure that your sources are credible. So when we teach writing, we teach not only how to write like nice sounding sentences, but also how to develop metacognition, or the ability to think about the way that we think. So how do we assess student work at a time when we know that AI use can be done at scale? Some UP, so for example, the UP Artificial Intelligence Program has given statements about this question of how do we deal with AI use at scale, especially when we are assessing student work. So I'm just going to read it because the text might be too small. So in 2023, the UP Diliman AI program said, students have become concerned that faculty members might weaponize AI detector systems to claim academic dishonesty against original outputs. The faculty of the UPD AI program condemns the misrepresentation of outputs as, as original content when they're actually generated by AI. So that is something that is condemned. However, the use of AI tools to enhance and facilitate the students' learning should be encouraged. AI tools can improve our writing skills, provide rapid visualization and prototyping of our ideas, enable quick access to a large body of knowledge, and demonstrate to us how to build better computer programs. It would be frivolous to ban AI tools in our university computer networks. It is recommended that we utilize this technology in our academic life in order to improve our learning productivity. Kanyas Lamas from the UP Open University also said, UPOU believes that AI will play a big part in developing lifelong learning skills among learners. For teachers, the guidelines specify how AI should be used for course design and course delivery. Students may use AI to support the attainment of the program or course outcomes, such as to enhance their students' understanding and facilitate more effective learning activities. Teachers should also declare to their students the extent of AI use, allowed or disallowed in learning activities, facilitating learning, and grading or assessing student submissions. Students must declare and properly cite AI-generated content, avoid plagiarism when using AI, and disclose to students and disclose to respondents the use of AI in cases of data collection for their coursework. So what is clear in these statements by these bodies, like policy and standard guideline making bodies of the university, is that we're not going to ban AI completely. We understand that in the future, and even now, AI increasingly will be part of our workflows, and that we need to understand how we can use it rather than it using us. Diba? Like using us, feeding on our data, and then becoming like better and better until we become redundant. Mga ganong dystopic visions. We need to use it, of course. Like AI are presented as tools that we can use to improve our productivity and workflows. But in thinking about this question of instrumentality, now, can we use AI? We also need to remember that the tools we use also shape us. So that's the other thing that I'm concerned about with AI. As we relegate more and more of our functions to AI, such as writing a nice sounding email because I can't make myself be nice, or asking AI to write something in an empathetic way because I can't be bothered to be empathetic myself. As we relegate more and more of these human communicative functions to AI, how does that also affect the way that we think, the way that we deal with the difficulty of writing, the way that we go through the mess of information in order to create a coherent narrative for ourselves? Like, as we use our tools, how are these tools also shaping us? That's another question that I'm interested in. So one of the things that I've been doing in my classes since 2022 is to require students to answer a survey before being allowed to enter Google Classroom. And the survey is basically like, what are your learning expectations, but also read the UP policy on plagiarism, what did you learn about it? So it's like a survey, but it's also a pop quiz about their familiarity with the university policies on intellectual dishonesty, etc. So one of the questions I put in that questionnaire is, does the use of AI text generators like ChatGPT to write parts of an essay requirement constitute intellectual dishonesty? So my purpose in asking them to answer this question is to get them to think about, oh nga no, parang, am I being dishonest if I use ChatGPT, or am I being dishonest if I use AI generators? So I'm going to share with you some of the responses of my students from this semester. So some students answered yes, it is intellectual dishonesty because it is a fraudulent act. So one student wrote, using AI text generators in order to compose an essay is an act of intellectual dishonesty because it is analogous to allowing someone to impersonate oneself in an academic activity. AI text generators should only be used as supplementary tools whose supposedly minimal involvement in the writing process should be explicitly indicated upon submission of the finished work. And if the instructor prohibits the use of these completely, the student should willfully obey and respect this rule. I think most students are, yes, I like you. Yes, welcome to my class. Therefore, making the likes of ChatGPT write the requirement instead of the student doing it themselves is fraudulent. May ganong student. Another student wrote, if AI were used in writing my essay, then it's intellectual dishonesty because the output is still not mine, not my own words, ideas, and writing style. Another student said, it is fraudulent since the work is being passed off as theirs, and also they are achieving academic advantage since their work is written by artificial intelligence, and therefore that's why it's academic dishonesty. So there's that added qualification of, you're doing this in order to gain unfair advantage over other students who might have not benefited from this. Other students said, yes, it's dishonesty because it is tantamount to plagiarism. One student pointed out that using AI text generators is no different from copy-pasting or just paraphrasing a reference from one source. The only difference is that it is being spoon-fed to the student, because when you're copy-pasting, at least you're, I don't know, do you even read the things that you copy-paste? Well, when you're copy-pasting, at least ideally, you're reading the thing that you are copying and pasting. Parang you decided, oh, this sounds nice, I'm gonna paste it in my paper. But when you use AITG, you don't even do that. Even that very minimal effort, wala. So the student is like, yeah, it's basically plagiarism. And then another student said, AI text generators are trained on texts written by others without the consent of the original authors. So that's basically stealing from somebody else, because you're not attributing anything to them. You're not acknowledging their creation of the work, because the AI itself does not often do that unless you prompt it to. And then another student said, AI uses information available in its database to generate answers. It is unable to properly credit sources. So most of you might have seen like the sample sources list that I asked AI to generate. what I did was, for the AI policy that I showed, I gave ChatGPT just the URLs of everything. And I said, can you cite this? Natamad akong i-cite siya into MLA. And then when I looked at the works cited list that ChatGPT generated, I realized that all of it is wrong. So I'm just gonna do it myself because you're wrong. So that's what ChatGPT tends. Those are part of the limitations of the AI. So some students naman answered, it depends on the intentions of the user and the purposes for which the tool is used. One student said, I believe that whether the use of AI can be considered intellectual dishonesty depends on the user. If one uses AI mainly for grammar check, I think that is harmless and may in fact improve one's writing. If it is just utilized as a guide, it should be fine. However, if the student solely relies on AI, then that will be problematic. Another student said, in my honest opinion, it is a helpful tool for writers. Of course, there are dangers like becoming too dependent or too lazy or more delulu, sabi ng student. Still, I think that if the writer needs a little help, for example, in creating an outline for research papers, then that's okay. In my experience, there are important subtopics that the AI tool was able to point out kasi nga it has access to such a huge database. And the student said, I didn't even think about that until the AI mentioned it. So I think it's parang the implication is that it's useful for things like brainstorming. Other student said, it depends, but it must not take the place of human learning, creativity, and judgment. One student said, ChatGPT can only be as effective as the person using it. It could be helpful in some scenarios, but without proper editing or not given the right direction of prompting, it may not come up with a credible result. Another student said, students themselves must be an example of how far the intellect and creativity of the human brain can do. When you use AI text generators, you're not really pushing the limits of human capacity because it's just working with what's already there, what is already commonly known. So you're not really pushing anything forward. And then another student very emphatically said, it defeats the purpose of true education. Hindi ko na siya na-probe, pero there's some students that I asked, kunwari, they're complaining about how many readings they have. And I said, just feed the reading to the AI and then make it create a summary. Minsan gino-joke ko sila ng ganon. And then the student said, hindi ako natuto. So, bakit ko gagawin yun? So there are also students who are adamant about, I need to learn these skills myself. Because if I depend on AI, what if the AI gives me something wrong? Or what if the AI malfunctions? What if we lose access suddenly to this technology? How can we then do things for ourselves if we don't know how to do it? So there are also students who point that out. So I asked ChatGPT his answer. Hindi ko pala dapat ina-anthropomorphize, but I asked ChatGPT an answer, and ChatGPT said, it could be considered intellectual dishonesty if the intention, and here the intention is important, if the intention is to present the generated content as one's original work without proper attribution or acknowledgement of AI's contribution. While AI can be a valuable tool for generating ideas, etc., it's essential to be transparent and give credit where credit is due. If you use AI-generated content, you should clearly indicate that it was generated by an AI tool and not solely authored by yourself. Failure to do so is a form of plagiarism. ChatGPT also emphasized, ultimately, it's important to adhere to ethical standards and guidelines set by your educational institution or the context in which you're writing the essay. If you're unsure about whether using AI is appropriate, it's best to consult with your instructor. Okay. So what I wanted to emphasize in presenting that range of responses from students themselves, what I wanted to emphasize is that there's really no clear line at which you can say, this is wrong and this is okay. In every context, in every class, every context have their own, each has its own purpose. So the purpose of the class, the purpose of the particular context determines the range of acceptable uses of the AI. Kasi for example, in my literature classes, instead of writing a paper, I allow students to make a research-driven creative project. So sometimes some students would set up like a website showcasing knowledge, or sometimes they would make a short film, or sometimes they would adopt a novel into a graphic medium, like a comics medium. So they asked me, is it okay if we use AI to generate images? Kasi ang main point naman ng project is to showcase what we learned from the class. It's not really to showcase our artistic skill. So is it okay if we use AI to generate images? And in that context, I would say, yeah, of course. Kasi yun nga naman, the point of the class is to showcase their literary analysis or their understanding of a text, and not really to showcase their art skills. So, but that question of can we use AI to generate images might be different if the class were a visual design class. Because in a visual design class, you're supposed to showcase your skills in visual design. So every class would have each class has a different purpose. So each class would have a different set of expectations about what AI use is okay and what AI use is not okay. So the point is that as teachers, we need to we need to explicitly state that to the students because they're also unsure about what's okay and what's not okay. So in the syllabus, I already list like the list of acceptable uses for AI in class. As long as you delineate that, whatever your class is, whether it's psychology or marketing or whatever the class is, you just have to specify what is okay and what is not. Because if the students, if you already said this is okay, that is not okay, and then the students still do what is not okay, then they are already willfully, disobeying the standards or the conventions of that particular class. So what we want to do in instituting these regulations and these guidelines is not to control students, but actually to help them become more agential, more intentional in their use of AI. Hindi lang siya pagbabawal, but we are trying to guide them to use AI with intentionality so that they can still get the most of the learning experience in that particular course. So this is a quote from Julia Stojanovic. She's a professor who works specifically on AI. She defines, kasi I've been saying AI, pero ano yung AI? So AI is a system. It's not just an algorithm. It's not just data, but it's a system in which algorithms use data to make decisions on our behalf or help us humans make decisions, right? Kasi there is no one absolute definition for AI. Some people would say that it's only artificial intelligence if it's capable of self-learning. Like without oversight, it can learn by itself. But some people would say, no, as long as it passes the Turing test, where a human engaging with the AI cannot tell if it's a machine or not. As long as it passes the Turing test, that's AI na. So there's no one standard definition of AI, but I think this is something that's good to work with because it emphasizes the utility for AI in helping us with decision making. Because all of us were so inundated with so much information all the time. Just look at your email inboxes and how many emails you receive. We live in a time of information hyper-saturation. So AI can kind of help us sift through what is worth paying attention to and what is not worth paying attention to. Like even your search engines are shaped by AI so that it shows you the most relevant, supposedly, outcomes or sources. But what's key is to ensure that our use of AI, because it has decision-making repercussions, if you use it for decision-making, it has wide-ranging implications. It's important for us to try to figure out how to control AI for the good while controlling the risks. So these are taken from the University of the Philippines Principles for Responsible and Trustworthy Artificial Intelligence. You can Google it later and then see what each keyword means. I just listed them all here. But I wanted to focus on the common good, empowerment, meaningful human control, transparency, and the primacy of learning goals and human capital development. This is specifically taken from the AI principles for education. So first, we emphasize the primacy of learning goals. AI use must still meet educational needs and priorities of learners, which we tend to articulate in learning outcomes, for example, in our syllabi, learner-centered pedagogy, and collaborative and social learning. I wanted to emphasize this, the collaborative and social nature of learning. Kasi when you're talking to an AI, when a student, instead of choosing to talk with their groupmates or talk with their teacher and go straight to the AI, you're actually bypassing a very important relationship. The relationship between the teacher and the student, and the relationship between the students and other learners. In that sense, AI takes on the function of being a synthetic relationship, an artificial relationship. When a student goes to ChatGPT instead of Google, ChatGPT kasi can also, the answers generated by ChatGPT for you, based on your own prompts, to some extent has a level of intimacy even. Kasi when you ask ChatGPT to generate answer to a question, you have the option of clicking the thumbs up or the thumbs down. So if you think that it's not a good response, you can click the thumbs down and then it regenerates the response. So in that sense, ChatGPT is also learning from you when you use it. So what happens is eventually it becomes like a tailor-made outfit for you when you're using it. And in that process of the AI learning from you so that it can fulfill your objectives, other relationships in terms of learning can become eclipsed. Kasi nga naman, pag nagtanong ka sa teacher, tapos sasabihin ng teacher mo, ba't di mo yan alam? Ganyan, yung mga some teachers, di ba? Some students become afraid to approach their teachers or their classmates, so they just turn to chatbots for information. So in that bypassing of an organic relationship for a synthetic relationship, that with the AI chatbot, there's so many learning opportunities and human opportunities for human oversight that also gets bypassed. So I wanted to emphasize that idea that learning is social and collaborative, and that the rise of these AI text generators can potentially pose a danger to that socially embedded aspect of learning. Second, human capital development. We want learners who are not only skilled but also very ethical in the use of AI. Capacity building, like what we discussed earlier, cultivating AI literacy rather than banning it. Education management and delivery, collaboration, etc. So the question is, how do we operationalize these principles of learning goals, human capital development, capacity building, education management, and delivery, and so on? Because they're just principles, eh? And they look really nice when you look at them. Like, of course we want collaboration. Of course we want accountability. These are all very nice sounding words. The question is, how do we operationalize these principles when we design our courses and when we interact with students, when we assess outputs, etc.? How do we operationalize? So one thing that is clear to me when I design my courses now is that instead of issuing a blanket prohibition and instituting merely punitive responses to AI use, punitive like, pag gumamit ka ng AI, ibabagsak ko yung buong papel mo. Instead of using the stick rather than the carrot, as it were, we can encourage experimentation and play with AI in our classes and discuss what responsible use consists in and craft policies, regulations, and standards accordingly, ideally in collaboration with students. So for example, one exercise that we can do in our classrooms is, for example, parang in real time, go to ChatGPT, make it cite the source, show the students how it cites the source, and then and in real time, correct the citation generated by the AI. Kunwari, pwedeng ganon. Or another example is, you can write a question let's say you're doing a mock exam for the students. You write a question that will actually come up in the exam, make ChatGPT answer it in front of the class, and then ask the class, what do you think about this AI's answer? Grade this AI's answer. How would you grade it? What would you add? What would you emphasize? What points would you emphasize? What points would you cut out? So in that exercise, you're also teaching the students how to create stronger arguments. If they think that the AI answer is not sufficient, they can come up with better answers. Ideally, that's how we can do it. But in practice, I never do that in class because my classroom does not have a good access to the internet. And the students also, they don't have good access to the internet. So in the context of UP and our infrastructure, it's not always possible to actually play with these technologies. So that's a limitation, the limitation of infrastructure and access. Because the AI policies are like, yes, we need collaboration and all of these. But also, we need to remember that there are very real material conditions and limitations that constrain the opportunities that we have to play with and create AI systems. But the important thing is to have an honest conversation with students. Kasi, for example, when a student turns in what looks to me like AI-generated work, I actually talk to the student. I try to build rapport with the students at the beginning so that they're not just scared of me. Like, I ask them, okay, I think this is a very problematic essay. Can you tell me what happened here? So, for example, I did that with one student who submitted an AI plagiarized work for a minor essay. And then the student said, well, kasi I'm working a part-time job at McDonald's and this is my shift, night shift siya, and then when she gets home, she has to take care of her sick mother, and then she commutes from Antipolo to UP. So she explains all of the things that she's dealing with, and then she says at the end, I really value your class, but also I simply do not have the time to do the coursework. So pag ganun yung condition ng students na taking care of sick mother, working part-time to afford school fees, to afford her education, what do you then do in that situation? Siyempre, pinagsak ko pa rin yung papel. Pero, pinag-usapan namin na what are the reasons that such things happen? Kasi it's not always that the students are simply lazy. Sometimes, they're very anxious about their own self-worth. Like, for example, all of your classmates are all of these brilliant people, and then next to them, you feel like, I'm not good enough for this class. Some of them feel like that na, I'm not good enough, especially compared to my brilliant classmates, so I need to use AI to even turn in passable work. Some of them feel like that. So it's important for me to have these conversations with them, not to be their therapist because I do not have the emotional bandwidth for that, but also to understand where they are coming from and how we can practically address these concerns when it comes to course design and assessment and so on. So this is something I won't repeat now, but this is an excerpt of what I put in the syllabus so that they know how they can use AI with responsibility in class. Very strict ako sa syllabus. I put everything there so that when it comes to the negotiation table, so to say, when they ask for example, extensions to the deadline, I would rather give them an extension to the deadline rather than get them to submit AI-generated work. Like parang, okay, ito yung acceptable use. If you don't want to transgress the boundaries of acceptable use, sige, I'll give you a deadline extension, may deduction ka lang, but at least please don't turn in AI-generated content because that would defeat the entire purpose of doing the exercise in the first place. So a thing that I asked them to do is to write the transparency declaration nga, which I will show again later, just explaining how they used AI in their workflows. So in general, when I think about what are, because the range of acceptable and unacceptable uses that I put in my syllabus, for example, honing the language of your essay, brainstorming, modeling, etc. These acceptable and unacceptable uses are particular to the aims of my classes, which are literature and writing classes. I'm sure that these would look different depending on what class you are working with. But all of us naman, parang all of us must be concerned with AI text generators kasi language is our primary means of disseminating information and knowledge. So whatever field you're in, you will have to deal with a lot of reading and writing. And tasks that have to do with reading and writing. So for myself, and this is also something that I suggest to students, whenever I decide whether to use AI for something, for a task or not, I ask these questions. First, is it low stakes or high stakes? I would probably use AI to write an email for people because it's kind of a low stakes thing, unless you're writing an email that goes to the chancellor. But if it's a low stakes thing, I can use AI. But if I'm writing like a grant application or a research proposal, I'm not gonna use AI for that. That's too high stakes. Second, is the task simple or complex? If you use AI to, for example, if you prompt it to create a draft of a lease letter or a contract, a lot of, writing that is highly templated, it's good at doing that. But if you ask it to analyze if you analyze the gender politics of the Marina Summers participation in Drag Race, mga ganyan, hindi na niya kaya yan. It's not something that the AI can credibly do. So if the task is simple, if the level of analysis required or thinking required is very low, it's easier to use AI. But the more complex and difficult a question is, it becomes like less credible to use AI. Other uses for other questions: is the topic conventional, adheres to a lot of widely accepted norms, or is it controversial? If the topic is controversial, it's better to be more skeptical about AI use. So for example, if you ask AI about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, it will generate different responses based on whether you ask about the role of Israel or the role of Palestine. For example, I don't know if you've been following the coverage of the crisis that has been going on for so long, but I've been following like the publications of New York Times, The Atlantic, all of these Western publications, and I've noticed that if you go to a publication like The Atlantic, it would have a very strong pro-Israel bias. Compare that to if you go to, for example, Al Jazeera, which has a very pro-Palestine bias. But AI is trained more on these more widely available Western texts. So when you ask it about controversial topics, and its training data set draws overwhelmingly on a particular set of knowledge production that is not censored in the public sphere, you will get more biased results. So if you're dealing with a controversial topic that involves marginalized and oppressed and suppressed voices and perspectives, it's better not to ask AI because it's gonna give you the hegemonic analysis. It's gonna give you the hegemonic interpretation. So this matters a lot for all of us who work with like oppressed and marginalized groups, for example. So if a topic is controversial or if it involves oppressed or marginalized groups, it's better not to rely on AI. Another question: is the topic general or does it draw on specialized knowledge? The more specialized it is, the less credible information from AI is going to be. And then another question is the topic talked a lot about in global sources or globally circulated sources of information? Because if a source is not really globally circulated, if it's very localized or very regional, written not in English but say in Bahasa Indonesia, for example, more localized and regional knowledges or even indigenous knowledges, these would have less representation in the global economy of knowledge production. And AI, again, is trained more on these globally available data sets. But if I were to boil this down, my key recommendation is this. If you yourself cannot do or are not very confident or do not have the skill or domain knowledge to do a task or write about a topic yourself, then you should not rely on AI. Because AI, in order for it to work for you, needs your own oversight so that you can correct its mistakes. And in order to be able to correct the mistakes of AI, you have to know more than it does. You need to have the domain knowledge to fact check the AI itself. So for teachers, that's important to impart that to students. Now, you're taking our courses because you are learning pa. You are learning all of these skills and all of these knowledge so that when it comes to AI use, you can use it responsibly because you yourself know what's the right thing. If you don't know what is the correct and right thing to do, you will not be able to spot that when the AI provides you with false information kasi you don't know it. So you have to know. Second recommendation, encourage students to reflect on what learning means to them and what they would like to develop throughout the course instead of focusing on grades or predetermined learning outcomes. How could AI use help or hinder them in the pursuit of their own learning aims? How can they be accountable to themselves and to their communities of discourse and practice? So another thing that I noticed when students choose to use AI in coursework is that they simply don't care about the exercise. Sometimes students go to our class because it's required for them to be able to get their degree. But when they turn up to class, some of them, it's obvious that they're not really interested in the class, or they don't really care personally about the assignment. If they were going to do it, they were just going to do it so that they can get a grade. Those are the kinds of students that we get in every class. Parang from the perspective of a teacher, you can take that as, ay nako, this student is not engaged, I'm not gonna make the effort. Some teachers naman would take that as a challenge na, here is a disaffected learner, let me dazzle you with my brilliance and get you engaged in class. It also depends on the teacher, but it's important to acknowledge that not everyone is gonna care about what you're saying in class. So some students turn to AI because they simply do not care. So for me, I like to say na for me the challenge is how do we get them to care. But I also understand that that's a huge burden on teachers. You're already teaching, tapos ikaw pa yung gagawa ng motivation for them. Parang that's a lot of emotional burden. But one thing that I try to get them to think about is, okay, on the first day of class, diba, they tell you why they're in the class. And most of them say, I'm here because it's required. So, okay, fine, you're here because it's required. But since you're here anyway, and we're gonna spend months together anyway, what do you want to get out of this class? Sometimes you don't even think about that, na what do you want to get out of something. It's interesting to me. Kasi whenever I approach something, I always think about, well, what is this gonna contribute to my skill or whatever. Sila kasi minsan hindi na nila iniisip. So even on the first day of class, I asked them, since you're here anyway, what is it that you want to work on? And when they begin thinking about that question and articulating to everyone else in the class what they can be here for, aside from the grade, aside from the requirement, then when they go through the rest of the class, I encourage them to go back to that initial answer. Na how can, even if you feel like this is not making sense, what we're discussing is not of relevance to you. Sometimes kasi the work of creating relevance is just a lot of self-rationalization. Like, if you think enough about something, you can always find a point of interest or connection to something. We're very good at that. Na even if something is not about us, we can make it about us. Everyone is good at that. So use that skill in class. Like, this is not about you, but you can make it about you. So how can you do that? So just try to take ownership of your own process of learning. If you feel like you can get something out of this, playing to the self-interestedness of students, if you feel like you can get something out of this, they would be more likely to do their assignments with that in mind. Now, I'm trying to get something out of doing this. This is not meaningless work. I can get something from this. But I don't just play to self-interestedness. I also play to like a collective sense of responsibility. Because if you don't develop these skills on your own, And then you become a journalist, you become a doctor, you become a lawyer. And your knowledge, your skill set, they're all compromised because you've not been doing the due diligence. You're going to be affecting people's lives. Even if you're working in customer service or retail, if you don't develop the necessary skills for whatever profession you're going to enter, then you're going to be shortchanging the other people who are supposed to benefit from your training and your education. Our failure to do our due diligence and to behave ethically when it comes to learning and research, they have repercussions not only for us personally, but for the fields that we are working in and for the communities that rely on our expertise. Like whatever profession, there's always a community that we seek to benefit, that we seek to help. And if we don't develop ourselves, do the work, we're gonna be shortchanging the people who rely on us. So I also emphasize that to students na really reflect on what learning means to you. Why are you in this university? And we know that UP education is so difficult, pero you signed up for this eh. Hindi ka naman namin drinag na mag-enroll at mag-take ng OPCAT. You signed up for this. So now that you're here, what are you going to do about the learning opportunity that has been given to you? Are you going to do the work and actually develop yourself, or are you going to shortchange yourself by not doing the work? In the end, if you cheat naman, you're shortchanging yourself. So in that sense, it's not really new, this whole conversation about education and cheating and so on. It just needs to be, I suppose, re-emphasized to students. Because cheating is now easier than ever before. This is taken from the transparency declaration that I asked them to submit when they submit their final requirements. So this is just a means or a mechanism for me, for them to articulate to be transparent about their use of AI and also to take accountability for how they produce knowledge in our courses. So if they check the second box, that is, if they use AI, ito yung second box, yung this second. Yeah, this one. So if they check that, they have to explain in greater detail how they use AI in their workflow. And in my experience, in my courses, most students do not use AI. Kasi they feel like this is extra work for them. Like, when they use AI kasi, they have to explain pa exactly how they used AI. So, bilang tinatamad din sila, I did not use AI. Or they would say, I used AI, but I just used Grammarly, I just used a plagiarism checker. And most of the time, it's actually true na they just don't bother using AI. Kasi in order to make effective use of AI in your papers, kasi that's very complicated high-level cognition, di ba? Even if you ask AI to generate content, you can't just copy-paste it if you want a good paper. If you want an actually good paper, you still have to do a lot of your own research and editing and verification. So parang nagsulat ka rin actually when they do that. So, another reason that I put this transparency declaration is, I tell students, whatever you submit to my class, I will assume that it was you who wrote it. My initial assumption is not gonna be, oh, this student probably cheated or used AI text generators. And it just doesn't feel good. Na parang, we've spent the entire semester together, we've had really great discussions, and now at the end, I feel like you all might have cheated. So it doesn't feel good to adopt this suspicion. So just tell students, whatever you submit to me, I will take it as face value that you were the one who wrote it, and I will grade it as such. If you used AI irresponsibly or carelessly, that will show in your essays. If you used AI responsibly, then you probably are good enough to actually check the AI, and therefore you are able to demonstrate that you learned what you needed to learn from my class, because you can exercise meaningful human oversight and control over the AI. Now, if you really cheated, like asked somebody else to like write an essay for you, ask your boyfriend to write your essay for you, wala na ako dyan. I can't do anything about that. A person who is determined to cheat will cheat. But from my end, I am going to assess and give feedback on what you give to me. So yun na lang yung stance ko, and I clarify that to students so that I also take care of my own mental health and frustration and so on. But another way by which I encourage students to critically reflect on AI in their education is by integrating topics about AI in course design. I don't know how applicable this is in other disciplines, but in English 13 kasi, the way I handle the class is we read a lot of sample essays for class, and then students write about their own research projects. So when I draft my syllabus, there was a semester where all of my sample essays, sample papers were all about AI because we were all trying to get a handle on this new and disruptive phenomenon. So some suggested topics that you can explore with your students: the implications of AI on developments in the digital arts and humanities. So for example, AI has done a lot of good for translation studies. For instance, now it's easier to translate one text to another through ChatGPT, which can also do translations. You can even chat with ChatGPT in Tagalog and in Waray. I also tried it. I just don't know how good its Waray is, and I don't understand Waray, so I could not verify it. But it does speak a number of regional languages like Waray, Cebuano, etc. It can understand not just English, but most of its data set kasi is English, so it's still best in English. Ganyan. We can also discuss with your students the implications of AI on our notions of creativity, authorship, publishing, and copyright. So for example, if you look at copyright, there are a number of ongoing lawsuits on AI copyright, ganyan. But current copyright regulations stipulate that for work to be copyrighted, it has to be produced by a human. So AI-generated work is not yet copyrightable. It has to be produced by a human. Last year also, the journal Nature released guidelines for authors with regard to AI text generation. And it says that AI cannot be credited as an author because AI cannot take responsibility. So imagine you write a scientific paper, and then and parts of the scientific paper AI wrote. Tapos you present it at conferences. AI is not gonna take questions from the audience. AI is not gonna make a paper presentation, a poster presentation about the paper. If the paper presents misinformation, AI is not gonna face any lawsuits for medical malpractice or something. AI cannot be held accountable because it has no personhood. It is generally seen as a tool. So authorship here, we emphasize that authorship is not just about creating something. Authorship is also about being able to take responsibility for what you created. So current publishing guidelines do not recognize AI as an author because an AI cannot take responsibility or take accountability for any wrongdoing or misinformation. So other things that we can talk about with our students, the AI revolution and aforementioned issues about access, the digital divide, and the future of work. For example, one of my sisters works in a global corporation that works with marketing research. And she tells me that in their company, they already use AI in their work processes. They have a very specialized AI that was created specifically for their company, and that AI is trained on internal company data. So when they do marketing research, sometimes you just feed the data to the AI, and it's the AI who generates analysis and insights about the data. And then my sister, who's a marketing director of some sort, she just looks over the AI analysis, and then she just corrects everything and then writes it up better, etc. But it's already integrated into their workflows. And the information is more credible because that AI mechanism was tailor-made for that particular company, for their particular purposes, and trained on their internal data. A lot of law firms also, I think, already use AI. Now, they just feed it with a data set that is specific for the purposes of that company or that agency. So that's what one of my sister does. My other sister naman does mostly freelance work. And a lot of her freelance work is actually in the field of transcription. And now she's worrying because in a few years' time, her transcription services or these online assistants that you can get online, in a few years' time, these jobs will be rendered redundant because AI is developing at such a rapid pace that a lot of the jobs that we outsource to other people will become redundant. So how do we prepare our students for a future in which a lot of these tasks can now be relegated to AI? How do we future-proof them? That's another question that many people are worrying about, the redundancy in a lot of jobs. But also, I'm also thinking that this is not an inevitable future because, of course, companies will prioritize their profit margins. But what can we as workers do to pressure governments, for example, to regulate AI in such a way as to foreclose or prevent mass unemployment, for instance? So what can governments do to prevent this future of mass unemployment? So we can discuss these concerns with the students. We can also discuss things like surveillance capitalism with our students, how our engagement with social media and putting up everything online is actually feeding into the development of AI technologies that may someday replace us. Who is profiting from all of this AI use is another question that we can ask. And are the profits from AI use and productivity actually filtering down to the people who are doing the work for these AI by training the AI in ways? Other things that this is something I'm particularly interested about, the repercussions of AITGs for political marketing, disinformation, and democracy. So if you followed, for example, the work of scholars like Jonathan Ong, who has written about networked disinformation, diba? In current political marketing, you have highly trained agency people who write scripts and create strategies for disseminating psyops during electoral campaigns, for example. What if you no longer need to hire an entire troll army in order to disseminate misinformation online? What if you can use AI to seed misinformation and affect the opinions of a great mass of people? So it's not just about disinformation, but actually influencing how people think. So imagine, for example, a chatbot that you create a synthetic, intimate relationship with, knowingly or unknowingly, and then eventually this chatbot feeds you information. And because you've already cultivated an intimate relationship with a particular chatbot, for example, you have a tendency not anymore to interrogate the things that the chatbot is saying to you. So AI, because it works with language, with communication, it is able not to create synthetic relationships with humans. So in the field of romance, that's already a scary thing. Imagine being scammed by an AI out of your money, falling in love with an AI like Spike Jonze's Her. But imagine that being transplanted to political marketing, to the political realm, with chatbots influencing our very voting behavior. So these are things that we can, think about in our classes. And another thing that's very important for us who live in a very climate vulnerable country, LLM computing and various forms of computing, they take a huge toll on the environment because all of these machines need water and electricity to run. They have a huge carbon imprint. This is the same argument against NFTs or non-fungible tokens. Parang okay, it's like a great thing to use to make money or exchange information, etc. But all of these digital objects, they require a lot of energy to maintain. So if we keep using LLMs, what harms are we causing to the environment and prioritizing or using these technologies? So all of these discussions are things that we can incorporate into our course designs as a way of integrating discussions also about AI. Para hindi lang, so that we're not just concerned about AI at the stage of checking papers. Hindi lang yon. Throughout the entire course, we can already incorporate ways of thinking about these new disruptions to our learning and teaching experiences. And then third, another thing that I keep in mind when I integrate AI into course design is respecting the process of teaching and learning. What do I mean by respecting the process of teaching and learning? Because when you use AI, it's so great because because it can generate in seconds, in literal seconds, what it could take for an average human being entire days to work on. So, writing an essay takes a lot of time, takes a lot of research, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of mistakes. And that's very difficult. Personally, I dread writing, which is weird. But I dread writing because it's so difficult. When you're in the thick of it, it's so difficult. It takes so much from you. It takes time away from your family. It takes time away from your hobbies. So it's easy for me to understand why some people would want to bypass that difficulty and just generate something without much effort. But given this understanding, I emphasize to the students, especially those who use AI because they feel very anxious about their own capabilities, I emphasize to them that it's okay to feel difficulty. That's the point. You're learning in order to encounter difficulty. Writing is processual. It's not just a thing that emerges as a fully formed product, but it goes through a lot of processes. It is iterative, meaning that it usually goes through many repetitions. You turn in a draft, you get you get feedback, you revise, you turn it in again, you get feedback again, you revise, you turn it in again. It works with repetition. It is dynamic, like what you wanted to write about at the beginning may change after 3 weeks. It is idiosyncratic, meaning that every one of us tend to think in particular ways or express ourselves in particular ways. And that's the fun in reading student essays. Now, I get a window into their personalities, how they think, what they value. That for me is the interesting part of marking student essays. Now, I get to understand my students as people. But if you don't want to engage with these difficult processes of repetition and revising and dealing with individual differences, and you turn to AI is so anodyne. Parang when I read AI work, even if you ask it to write in the voice of a valley girl or an otaku or whatever, it's still kind of boring, still falls short. So I emphasize to the students that writing takes time, that often when we write, we begin from a place of ignorance. That's why we do research, because we don't know the answer. It's uncomfortable to do research and to especially when you encounter opinions that don't support your own beliefs. It can be a very uncomfortable experience. There's a lot of confusion and mess and disagreement, but we work through the mess. We work through the mess of your drafts. And then at the end, when you finally turn in your paper, even if it's not perfect, at least you know that at least you know that you know what you're talking about, because you did the work. So at the end of it, even if what we come up with is not perfect, at least it's something that came from you. It may not be completely clear, but at least, ideally, you have conviction in what you wrote. Nag-overtime na pala ako, sorry. Of course, I say that it's easier said than done. Of course, we want expectation. In ideal conditions, we will be able to calibrate coursework to meet student needs. We would be able to scaffold assignments. It's not just one huge paper at the end, but you have a number of writing exercises. You're able to provide early and substantial feedback so that you can quickly catch mistakes. In an ideal world, there won't be grades for me. In my ideal world, there won't even be grades. We learn for the sake of learning. But the reality is that often as teachers, we don't even have time to check everything, with all of the other things that we are dealing with. I want to provide my students early and substantial feedback, but they did their first exam a month ago, and I still haven't returned their exams because I've been busy with other things. So that's the reality that we are dealing with. So it helps also to be kind to ourselves, or not be kind. Hindi, parang masyadong feel good yung kind eh. But just to be realistic about our conditions for teaching and learning, we have to remember that teachers' working conditions also shape students' learning experiences. So, for example, if a student feels like, ay, masyado namang maraming chine-check si ma'am, hindi na niya babasahin yung papel ko, then they wouldn't exert too much effort on it because they feel like she won't actually have time to check it. So, these material conditions of work also affect our relationship with AI. So I emphasize this point kasi there's a tendency to overly emphasize on AI itself as the thing that's wrong and dangerous, when actually the use of AI is embedded in broader historical and cultural forces. And I suppose I would like to end, ending na. I would like to end with this point. When I emphasize authorship and accountability and agency in my writing courses, I emphasize authorship, accountability, and agency as a way of countering the alienation that many students and workers feel towards their work. Alienation meaning sometimes they write an essay not because they're actually interested in what they're writing about, but because they need a grade. They feel alienated about, they don't feel ownership for the things that they turn in. Sometimes they just want to write something to meet the teacher's expectations rather than their own expectations or their own interests. And this is not entirely their fault because we exist in a culture where, for example, market-driven knowledge production, the managerial university, which emphasizes efficiency and productivity and outcomes, the turn towards obedizing everything. Like every learning activity has to be tied to a specific goal, whether it's a sustainable development goal or it's a curricular mandated learning outcome. When you write grant proposals, it has to meet specific goals. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having goals, but when every single thing has to have a utility, and sometimes you know that you're not meeting the utility, but you're just gonna bullshit your way so that you can meet the utility. Minsan ganun din eh. That kind of structure and context tends to cultivate a sense of alienation between learners and teachers and researchers and the work that they actually produce. When higher education is treated like a commodity and universities are treated like prestige brands whose positioning and reputation and quality assurance, like in the Times Higher Education rankings, mga ganyan, all of this emphasis on branding and rankings, which we need to get the money that we need to operate, but also when these are what many administrators and teachers and students are concerned with, when grades function as standardized assessments that impose a hierarchy of value and marketability for students, it becomes easier for students and even teachers to objectify coursework and publishing and production as a game of getting the most bang for your buck, or getting the best possible outcome, the best possible grade with the least amount of effort. That is, education then becomes a numbers game of efficiency and productivity. This, I understand, is a very cynical view, and this, I understand, is something that not everyone believes. I still stay in academia despite opportunities for making more money elsewhere. Those of us who stay in academia do so because we believe that education is more than this. And a lot of our students, they engage in good faith in our classes because they actually want to learn. But that's something that's on an individual level, our own personal values and goals. But as a general culture, there are trends towards this because capitalism. So the general trend is towards the commodification of everything because late capitalism. So we are also, when we deal with things like cheating and AI and plagiarism, we are also dealing with this these forces of late capitalism, so to say. So we are working against this. So how do we do that in our courses is something that is for us to consider when we go back to our classes later, perhaps. So thank you so much for listening thus far.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reynaldo, for that very insightful lecture and for sharing your own experience.